Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 2025 Norway chess. This is one of the strongest classical events ever in the whole year. And we have the current World Chess Champion Gukesh Dommaraju, the GOAT Magnus Carlsen, and we have Hikaru Nakamura, Arjun Erigaisi, Fabiano Caruana, and many strong players. In the men's session, there are 6 grandmasters, and also in the women's, we have Zhu Enjun, Lei Tingjie, and many more. This tournament has a high quality of chess games. It has a ton of chess games with high quality, and also has a lot of drama happening. And also, due to these drama, usually some dramatic games lead to more drama than we expect. And today in this video, our main character are Gukesh Dommaraju and none other than Magnus Carlsen. In round 6, these two have met. And actually, before, in round 1, Magnus is playing with the black pieces. Actually, with the white pieces or the black pieces, I'm not entirely sure about that. But in the very first game, Magnus defeated the world champion. I mean, Gukesh is the youngest world champion, but Magnus, considered by many, is still the strongest chess player in the world so far. And in this game, something dramatic happened. Not only the game is dramatic, but also after this game, someone just was enraged. The side who lost was enraged and then just slammed, just hit the table hard. And some of you guys might already know who that person is, but some of you guys don't. And before I tell you guys who really did that, let's jump into this game to see who is hitting the table and why is he in such a huge rage. So the game, Gukesh is with the white pieces, Magnus with the black pieces, and here we have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, knight f6, d3. Now this is the Ruy Lopez opening, or here as we called more specifically the Berlin defense. And some of you guys might be more familiar with the move a6 first, bishop a4, and then knight f6, whereas after castles, perhaps he'll go for bishop e7. This is the mainline, the Morphy defense as we call, and here going knight f6 immediately is called the Berlin. And here Gukesh plays the move d3, because sometimes you do want to ignore some very annoying ideas of black, because if you go castle, black can have the chance to take on e4 immediately and lead to some very equalized positional endgames. For example, this is a line that we see a lot, whereas you can go bishop f1 back, but also you can take, and after knight takes, rook takes, bishop e7, bishop f1 back. This is the main line of the Berlin defense, and everything is actually quite equalized, so there's not much about it. And that is why in the game, Gukesh instead played the move d3, defending the pawn, making the position staying longer in the opening stage. And here, Magnus plays the move bishop c5, developing his bishop. Gukesh plays c3. Very common idea in the Ruy Lopez, where you want to support the center, push d4, and also sometimes prevent any bishop b4 ideas. And also, you have your own b4 ideas to hit the bishop. In the game, Magnus plays short castle, d6, defending the e5 pawn. Here we have the move h3. This is always a move that is very necessary in the Ruy Lopez. So, you play h3, and it's very reasonable. You do want to prevent black from playing bishop g4 to pin this knight and the queen, which will be very annoying if you allow it. And maybe even in the future, you have knight d2, knight f1, knight h2 ideas, where this knight comes to the h2 square to push f4. In the game here, Magnus decides to play a6 first to attack the bishop, bishop a4 back, h6. So for black, playing this h-pawn move is also very necessary. Again, black also has knight h7 ideas if necessary in the future. Rook e1, b5, the bishop goes to c2 immediately, bishop b6 back, knight d2, knight e7, a4. Rook b8. So far in this game, both sides have used about half an hour on their clock. And here, Magnus spent about like 9 minutes after playing this rook b8 move, because here he has a lot of options. He can also play bishop b7, which is not bad. Even bishop d7 is considerable. Rook b8's idea here is to first of all run away from this a file, because white is pinning the rook and the pawn and always threatening to take on b5. So here going rook b8 is very just logical, because not only you run away from this pin, but also in the future you can support the b file and even at some point push b4. But right now that is still a plan far away, and Gukesh immediately starts his own attack by playing the move d4. Knight g6 was played. Magnus is kind of like repositioning his knights. Here knight f1, Gukesh is doing the same. c5. Now all of this is actually very standard in the roll opus. This is just how both sides should be playing, and there's not much new ideas for both sides to play, and basically this is just how you reroute your pieces to where they should be at and push the pawns. And here you have 3 options for white. These 3 options of taking pawns, both of them, all of them are possible. And here Gukesh, however, ignores all of them and plays the move knight g3, just following his idea and developing his knight, putting it to a better place, supporting the center as well as at some point threatening knight f5. Magnus plays the move c takes d4, opening up the center, exchanging off a pair of pawns. C takes d4, b takes a4, another pawn's off the board. Bishop a4, bishop b7, d5. We reach a position where two pair of pawns have been traded off the board. In the center, the pawn structure are fixed, which is very common. And on the queen side, there's an a pawn and a b pawn. So actually, without these 2 pawns, as you can see, the position will be very similar. Both sides, their pawn structure as well as their pieces ideally placed. These 2 knights are kind of the knights are on the same squares. So without these 2 pawns, the position will be much more boring. But still, at this point, there's some counterplay for both sides, and here Magnus plays the move a5. Using this pawn, pushing to a5, preventing white from playing b4, and here Gukesh plays bishop e3, offering a trade of dark square bishops. And here Magnus, he didn't really take on e3, nor did he retreat the bishop. He just played this move, bishop c8, a very calm move, but also very accurate, because you open up this file for the rook to defend the bishop, and also this bishop can have more, a much brighter future here on this diagonal. Some point threatening to sacrifice on h3, and also just simply putting pressure on the light squares. So this is a very accurate move by Magnus, and here Gukesh plays the move b3, putting his pawns on light squares, defending the bishop, as well as at the same time the bishop in return defends the pawn. Bishop takes e3. Finally, Magnus decides to trade off a pair of bishops. Rook takes e3, of course, and here knight f4, jumping straight into the position and putting some pressure on these pawns. And here Gukesh played the move bishop c6. This is a move that is kind of inaccurate because it gives black some chances to go for tactics immediately, and if you still remember, the usage of this bishop c8 move is that it can at some point play bishop h3. Oops, that's in wrong arrow, bishop h3. And with correct calculation here, you just realize that you can take on h3 immediately at this point, and after g takes h3, knight takes h3. So even though here white is up in material, black used a minor piece to trade off 2 pawns. But as you can see, this knight, if you go king g2, this knight can just simply go back to f4 and checking the king. The king is kind of weak because it just lost 2 pawns in front of it. But also this knight is coming to g4 on the very next move. So black actually has a lot of compensation for the 2 pawns in return, with the very active 2 knights controlling, dominating the king side and attacking white's king. But of course, it needs a lot of calculation, and your correct evaluation of the position, and instead in the game Magnus decides to play for something more calm but still full of great ideas, and he played the move rook b4. So the idea is basically very simple: to put pressure on the e4 pawn and maybe even in the future doubling the rooks on the b file to attack the b3 pawn. Here, Gukesh played the move queen c2, which is considered as a mistake here. But there's no clear reasons why. The engine just doesn't like it. It's not in its favor. Here, the best move for white is actually to go for something which more seems like human move, human cannot really see these moves, more like computer moves. Knight d2 is one of the best moves in this position, rerouting the knight to c4 to attack the a5 pawn. This might be possible to be spotted by humans, but after bishop a6, it is questionable if white can still play knight c4. And after queen c2, for example, trying to prepare for knight c4 on the next move, black can play queen b6 ideas, and it's still full of arguments and everything, and it's not a very clear idea for white. So that is why in the game, Gukesh instead plays queen c2 first to support the e4 pawn. g6 was played. This is a very accurate reply by Magnus, controlling all of these squares, preventing white's knight from jumping into either of them. King h1, bishop a6, queen a2. So this is actually Gukesh's idea, to double the rook and the queen on the a file and to attack the a5 pawn. But the problem is, Magnus now has this really nice move, bishop d3. And suddenly you just realize the e4 pawn is under huge trouble, but also it is not that easy for white to really have the courage to take on a5, because if you take on a5 immediately, then after queen takes a5, rook takes a5, and let's say you can either take on e4 or take on b3. If you take on e4 at this point, not only does even the pawn structure is kind of better for black, but also at the same time, b3 is a weakness, d5 is under attack, knight h3 ideas might be possible, the bishop is eyeing the g2 pawn and the king, and it's black who is the side that is much better. So in the game here, instead of taking on a5, Gukesh, maybe he missed bishop d3, or maybe he thought that he had a better reply and he played the move knight d2, retreating this knight back and defending the e4 pawn, which seems okay. But now Magnus played the move h5. This is the best move, and this just shows that why Magnus is considered widely by a lot of people to be the best chess player in the world, even though he no longer holds the title. This h5 move, because as you can see, black is just, attacking in the center on the queen side. Suddenly you just make this very insignificant pawn move on the king side where you didn't really do much, and suddenly for white just realized that h4 is coming and it's not that easy for white to make a nice reply, and white is under a lot of pressure here. Here Gukesh just takes on a5, and after queen takes, rook takes, but already at this point black is having a decisive advantage. With accurate play there should be no problem. Rook a4, rook b8, rook a2 back. The game now just went on, and there are some exchanges being made eventually. Knight takes h3, g takes h3, the bishop takes e4, king h2. It's actually really unbalanced, but black is just right now completely winning, and you can even just realize that by looking at the eval bar. The white color is already almost gone, and there's just no way that white can win, right? Or black can lose this thing. But sometimes, I'm not really telling you guys who really lost or who has won this game yet, but you might already have some guesses. Rook d1, g4, bishop d5, nothing special. Magnus is just playing extremely well. Gukesh as the worst side and the defending side only has a couple of options to play, so there's not really too many things that he needs to decide about. Rook c2, king f6, h4, king e6, king d5 goes up, rook a5, but the king still marches up the board. Rook a4, king d3, rook f2. These are just very pure calculation moves, and Magnus is just great with calculation, but not at this move. f6 is a mistake, and actually the best move, you just have to push this pawn one move further. f5. because at this point, speed is really important. And f5 immediately creates another pass pawn for black, and the higher the pawns get, the faster black is going to win. f6 attacks the knight and looks really attractive, looks like a very juicy move. This knight doesn't need to go back, because white can give a check first on f3, king goes to e2, and another check, which might be something that Magnus has missed. And already he needs to play rook d2 to block. Takes, and his advantage has shrinked. Almost like to no advantage. Knight e4 check, because right now white is having a lot of counterplay. d5, but of course black is up at the pawn, and there's no way for black to really lose this thing. And black is gonna still like play on and then trying to force white into some sort of really devastating situations and force white to make mistakes. Oops, sorry. Yikes. My keyboard just suddenly went insane. But I hope you guys didn't really see anything important. f6, rook c2. Sorry, not rook c2. Rook f3, rook a2, rook d2, takes. Knight e4, king goes here. d5 and rook f2, king e1, knight d7. Alright, at this point, due to time trouble as well, both sides have only about Magnus has 40 seconds, Gukesh has 20 seconds, and at this point already the position is quite unclear because Magnus played a couple of inaccurate moves and gives Gukesh the chance to survive already. And here the only move that black can still keep a slight advantage is to play the move rook e8. But still, here white can even just take on f4, and after takes, this is still a draw. But sometimes things just go wrong. And Magnus here plays the move knight e2, given 2 question marks. And this move definitely deserves 2 question marks because black just simply loses a knight. Rook takes e2, check. King has to take, and you lose the rook. And suddenly Gukesh is up a knight, and both sides have 3 pawns. Black can still try to push the pawns because it is slightly higher than white's pawns, but white is just in time to defend everything, to hold everything together. Knight a4, excellent defense by Gukesh. e4, already Magnus is really devastating because he just throw this whole game away. He is just completely winning. King d2, can Magnus still save the king? Well, knight b2, the pawn has to push because black really doesn't have any other options. But after knight c4, the king has to go to e2. And then king f4, black resigned. And with that, Magnus just slammed the table, hit the table really hard. Because, right now his only chance is to push the pawn d2. But white can just simply take on e3 and defend the promoting square. That's just game over. Yeah, it's game over. So, I can understand that Magnus is, at this point, at a really, having really raging, bad emotions already because you just thrown away a game that you're completely winning, and then you still can make a draw, but then you just simply, blundered a knight with no reason. But, sometimes, even now, when I'm playing in some very important tournaments, for example, I remember there's a time when I was up a knight, and actually 2 pawns, but that was a really, strange position because I have this knight somehow really passive, and my 2 pawns are really low up the board, hardly pushed, and my opponent has 2 pass pawns on the A file and the H file and pushed really high and somehow just limiting my pieces, and I actually lost that game even though it was just completely winning with accurate play. And there's just there are a ton of options for me, but I just played a blunder and lost that game, and I was really devastated. I even cried when in the playing hall, well actually maybe not in the playing hall, but when I just walked out of the playing hall, and it was really embarrassing when some of my classmates saw me crying. But what I'm trying to say is that when you face these kinds of situations, you just have to control your feelings, emotions, because sometimes this just happens and you can't really blame anyone because For example, you're under time pressure, or you've played for too long, like your brain is not functioning suddenly, and these kind of situations happen. And it will happen not just one time, but a ton of times in your chess career. But I mean, I'm definitely saying that hitting the table is not a good thing. But yeah, sometimes you just can't control it. Alright, but anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this game. At the beginning and in the middle, Magnus attacked really well, but Gukesh never gave up, and in the end game, he just flipped the table and won this game. Excellent play. Yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed this game recap as well as this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!